She was groomed for sex, picked up and abused by countless men around Blackpool's seafront before being murdered.
To Nicola Thorpe and began by asking her about her first memories of Charlene's case.
Why is now the moment to do all of this extra investigation?
She walked out of her front door on the evening of November 1st, 2003, and the streets of Blackpool swallowed her whole. She was 14 years old. She had a cheeky smile, a sharp sense of humor, and a laugh that people who loved her still talk about today. Nobody who saw her that night knew they were watching the last hours of Charlene Downs' life unfold in real time. Nobody stopped her. Nobody saved her. And 20 years later, nobody has ever been made to answer for what happened to her.
And somebody, somewhere, knows something.
Her full name was Charlene Downs. She was born on the 25th of March, 1989, in Coventry, a city in England's West Midlands that carries its own complicated history of rebuilding after devastation. Charlene was the third child of Corinne and Robert Downs, known to everyone as Bob. She had two older sisters, Rebecca, called Becky, and Emma, and a younger brother also named Robert. In a household that was rarely quiet and never simple, Charlene carved out her own identity. She loved music. She loved animals. She was the kind of kid who could make a room laugh without even trying, the one with a quick comeback and a restless energy that made her impossible to ignore.
Child sex exploitation in the same area.
Those who knew her described her as funny and warm, fiercely loyal to the people she cared about. She had a cheeky side, the kind of girl who bent rules not out of malice but out of a desperate need to feel free, to feel seen. She was not perfect. No 14-year-old is. But she was real and vivid and full of a life that deserved the chance to grow into something. The world Charlene was growing up in, however, was not a safe one. The Downs family had lived in Hillfields, one of Coventry's most deprived neighborhoods, where antisocial behavior and poverty were daily realities. Court documents from 1989, the very year Charlene was born, showed the family had already come to the attention of social services and West Midlands police.
First memories of Charlene's case.
Allegations of violence, neglect, and dangerous individuals with access to the family home surfaced early and never fully disappeared. A convicted rapist had been found with 3-year-old Emma unsupervised. Bob was cautioned. The warning meant little. By the time Charlene was 9, another allegation had been made. A family friend accused of forcing himself on her. Social services circled. The threat of the children being removed from the home loomed. And so in 1999, the family did what struggling families sometimes do when the walls close in. They moved. They packed up Coventry and headed north to Blackpool, hoping, perhaps, that distance would mean a fresh start. It did not. Blackpool presents two faces to the world. The first is the one on the postcards, the tower, the illuminations, the Golden Mile, the arcades spilling light and noise onto the promenade. Thousands of tourists flood in every summer. Families eat chips on the beach. Children ride the trams. It feels from the outside like an uncomplicated kind of joy. The second face is the one the postcards never show. Behind the bright lights lies one of the most deprived towns in England, 6th on the National Deprivation Index. Unemployment is high. Poverty is deep. Alcohol-related deaths occur at the highest rate in the country. It is a place where vulnerable people can fall through every crack in the system simultaneously, and where the darkness has learned to dress itself up in neon. This was the Blackpool that Charlene Downs moved into at 10 years old. By the time she was 11, she was already staying at different homes, moving between people unmoored. She told social workers she was being beaten by her parents and showed them the bruises to prove it. Her school flagged her absences. The hospital, after examining her at age 11, noted signs consistent with sexual abuse. She was placed in foster care with her sisters. The placement didn't hold. She came back home. Over 15 years, 16 men with offenses against minors had access to the Downs family homes in Coventry and in Blackpool. Social workers visited. Reports were filed. The Atrisk register had her name on it. And still, Charlene fell. She was 14 years old on the evening she disappeared. She had been failed so many times by so many people that the streets must have felt more familiar than safety ever did. She walked out into Blackpool's November night. And she never came back. Every predator needs an environment, a place where vulnerability concentrates, where young people drift without anchors, where adults in authority look the other way, and where the darkness can operate in plain sight. Blackpool in the early 2000s was exactly that kind of place. And it had no shortage of dangerous men. Because Charlene's case has never been solved, no one has ever been convicted of her murder. There is no single confirmed killer to name with certainty. What there is, however, is a documented network of predatory men who had access to her world in the final months of her life. What there is a town where, according to an internal police report, at least 11 takeaway shops in Blackpool's town center were involved in the sexual exploitation of young girls. What there is a pattern. And Charlene was caught inside it. The alleyway off Abington Street, the place where Charlene was last seen at 11 p.m. on the night of November 1st, 2003, was not a secret. People in the town knew what happened there. Young girls lacking money and structure would enter the backs of takeaway shops and return with cigarettes, alcohol, or cash. The transaction was never spoken aloud. It didn't need to be. The men inside those shops knew exactly what they were offering, and they knew exactly who was desperate enough to accept it. Charlene's friend Tyne later confirmed she herself had gone into the alleyway and exchanged sexual contact for drugs, money, and cigarettes. On nights when Tyne went in, Charlene would stand outside and act as a lookout in case police came. Tyne would pay her for doing it. This was the economy of survival that these girls had been pushed into not by choice, but by years of abandonment. Among the men connected to this world was Raymond Monroe, a convicted sex offender with 4 counts of sexual assault against young girls, sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. Bob Downs had met him at a pub and invited him back to the family home. Monroe stayed there. Bob and Corinne would later claim they had no idea about his convictions. But one of Bob's friends, Glenn, said he had seen Charlene sitting on Monroe's lap and had voiced his concerns directly. Nobody listened. Another figure who entered the frame was Nigel Lloyd, a chef whose flat overlooked the very alleyway where Charlene was last seen. Lloyd had attacked 2 15-year-old girls in Blackpool in 2001 and 2003. He was convicted of those attacks in 2017 and sentenced to more than 5 years in prison. Charlene's friend Tyne knew him. She called him a creep. He knew Charlene. He knew her family. In August 2017, he was arrested on suspicion of her murder. He was released after 2 days. No charges were ever filed against him in connection with Charlene's disappearance. And then there were Mohammed Rishi and Ayed Albatiki, the 2 men who would eventually stand trial for her murder. Mohammed, originally from Iran, ran a fast food shop called Funny Boys on Dixon Road. Ayed, originally from Jordan, worked there as an employee. Multiple witnesses would later state they had seen Charlene behind the counter of the shop. Emma Downs described Ayed as a creep who behaved inappropriately toward young girls in nightclubs. One of Mohammed's former foster daughters would later accuse him of sexual assault. These men moved through Blackpool's night economy with ease. They were embedded in the community. They appeared to most people entirely ordinary. That is how predators survive, not by looking like monsters, by looking like neighbors, by looking like the man behind the counter who gives a hungry, cold, vulnerable girl something warm to eat. Charlene was hungry, Charlene was cold, Charlene was vulnerable. And the night of November 1st, 2003 was getting darker by the hour. November 1st, 2003 was a Saturday. It was cold the way Blackpool Novembers always are, the kind of cold that comes off the Irish Sea and settles into your bones before you even realize it. The illuminations were still up, casting their familiar glow across the promenade. Tourists had thinned out. The town was winding down into its quieter, darker self. Charlene was 14 years old, and she had plans that evening. At 3:25 in the afternoon, she and her sister Becky were spotted walking down Bank Hay Street toward the Coral Island Arcade. Her friend Tasha confirmed she had seen her there too. It was an ordinary beginning to an ordinary Saturday. Two sisters out in town, the way teenagers are. Nothing in those afternoon hours suggested what the night would bring. According to the police timeline, Charlene returned home briefly before heading back out into the evening. Later, she and Becky made their way to the McDonald's near the promenade. From there, the pair walked to Church Street. At around 6:45 p.m., they reportedly crossed paths with their mother, Karen, who was handing out leaflets for the restaurant she worked at on that same street. Karen reportedly gave the girls some money. Charlene said goodbye to her mother. She walked off with her friends. It was the last time Karen Downs would see her daughter alive. The hours that followed are where the timeline begins to fracture. According to Charlene's friend Tyne, the two of them went to the Carousel bar at around 9:30 p.m. Tyne said men at the bar bought them drinks. At some point during the evening, Tyne lost sight of Charlene. She said she never saw her again. The police timeline differs slightly. It places the girls heading back into town before going their separate ways near Abington Street and Talbot Street at 11 p.m. What both accounts agree on is this. The last confirmed sighting of Charlene Downs was in an alleyway off Abington Street at approximately 11 p.m. on the night of November 1st, 2003. That alleyway was well known. Various takeaway shops backed onto it. Young girls in the town used it as a route in and out of those shops, returning with cigarettes, alcohol, and cash. Charlene had been seen there before. She knew it, and someone in or near that alleyway knew her. What happened to Charlene in the hours that followed has never been officially established in a court of law. Her body has never been found. There is no confirmed crime scene. There is no forensic evidence that has ever led to a prosecution. There is no grave, no resting place, no physical proof of what was done to her or where she was taken. What there is silence. A 14-year-old girl who walked into Blackpool's Saturday night and simply ceased to exist. Bob Downs called the police on the 3rd of November, 2 days after Charlene was last seen. The recorded call is difficult to listen to. When asked why he had waited so long to report his 14-year-old daughter missing, he said he had expected her to come back on her own. The police searched the family home and found nothing. No clues, no trace. The investigation formally had begun. But from the very start, the case was burdened. Charlene had been labeled a runaway, a troubled girl, someone who disappeared regularly. The system that had failed her in life was now, in death, struggling to recognize the gravity of what had happened. Missing person flyers went up. Leads came in and dried up. The weeks passed, then the months. Charlene did not come home. And somewhere in Blackpool, someone who knew exactly what had happened to her was still walking free. More than a year passed before the investigation got its first real break. And when it came from an unexpected direction. November 2004, a local businessman named David Cassidy walked into a police station with a story. Cassidy supplied slot machines to shops around Blackpool. He said that a man named Tariq had told him something deeply disturbing, that Tariq's brother, Ayed Albatiki, had confessed to murdering Charlene Downs, and that a man named Mohammed Rishi had helped him dispose of her body. Mohammed owned and operated Funny Boy's fast food on Dixon Road. Ayed worked there as his employee. Multiple witnesses had already placed Charlene near or inside that shop. The police asked Cassidy to wear a concealed microphone and record a follow-up conversation with Tariq. He agreed. In the resulting recording, Tariq denied ever having said those things. It was a setback, but the police pressed forward. In January 2005, they searched Mohammed's home. Nothing of note was found. The following month, both Mohammed and Ayed were brought in for informal questioning, and covert recording devices were installed as part of a surveillance operation. Over 4 weeks, those devices produced 52 CDs of recorded audio. The recordings were, by multiple accounts, deeply difficult to decipher, distorted, unclear, and technically compromised. Detective Sergeant Jan Besant volunteered to transcribe them. She would spend the next 2 years doing so. During the covert operation, a woman whose identity remains protected came forward with her own account. She said she had gone into Funny Boys for a coffee after an evening of drinking and had woken up in the upstairs flat with no clothes on and no memory of how she had come to be there. She reported this to police. She alleged that officers Jan Besant and Don Fraser asked her to make claims she could not verify. She refused. Her case was dropped. No charges were filed. On the 17th of March 2006, arrests were finally made. Ayed Albatiki was charged with murdering Charlene Downs. Mohammed Rishi was charged with helping dispose of her body. In May 2007, the trial began at Preston Crown Court. The prosecution argued that either Mohammed or Ayed had been engaged in a sexual relationship with Charlene, and that her murder had been carried out to prevent the police from finding out. Both men denied knowing her, but witnesses testified they had seen Charlene behind the counter at Funny Boys. Emma Downs described Ayed as a creep who behaved inappropriately toward young girls. The police alleged multiple prior accusations of sexual assault had been made against him. Mohammed's house had been exhaustively searched, carpets lifted, floorboards removed, every surface examined. No DNA evidence was recovered. The prosecution argued the property had been thoroughly cleaned. The defense argued there was simply nothing to find. Then the trial began to unravel. The defense requested the original audio recording of Cassidy's conversation with Tarek, the one that had started everything. The police said they couldn't find it. The court ordered them to locate it. A CD was eventually produced. It had a large scratch across it. The police said it was likely unplayable. Don Fraser's login details appeared in the system as the person who had entered the CD into evidence. Fraser denied it, saying someone had used his credentials to frame him. After 49 hours of deliberation, the jury could not reach a verdict. They were formally discharged. A retrial was ordered for 2008, but it collapsed before it could begin. The Crown Prosecution Service re-examined the evidence and found it deeply troubling. The covert recordings were of insufficient quality. Jan Besant's transcriptions were found to contain significant inaccuracies. In one critical example, a phrase she had transcribed as burial place was argued to actually be Paul's place. And tracking data from a device placed on Mohammed's car showed him visiting a friend named Paul around that same time. Forensic audiologist Elizabeth McLean stated that Besant's transcript showed clear signs of cognitive bias and should never have been used as evidence. Both men were acquitted. Mohammed Rishi and Ayed Albatiki walked free. They were awarded £250,000 in compensation. Mohammed said publicly that what had been done to him was shameful. He had spent more than 2 years on remand in prison for a crime the evidence could not support. In 2011, Jan Besant was found guilty of 2 counts of misconduct and forced to resign. That ruling was later overturned by the British Arbitration Tribunal, and she was reinstated. Charlene's case had produced no justice, only wreckage. 20 years is a long time to wait for an answer that never comes. Karen and Bob Downs are still living in Blackpool. The city that took their daughter never gave her back. In 2017, they sued Lancashire police over the handling of the investigation and the release of CCTV footage. In 2018, they appeared on the Jeremy Kyle Show, a decision Bob later said he regretted, as what was meant to be a platform to discuss Charlene quickly devolved into an examination of their marriage. Karen released a book that same year, called Sold in Secret, in which she spoke about Charlene and the years of searching for answers that followed her disappearance. In December 2021, the family suffered another devastating loss. Charlene's younger brother Robert, the only son, the youngest of the Downs children, was found by his father in a pool of blood. He had complained of feeling unwell a few hours earlier. An inquest later ruled his death an accidental drugs overdose. Those who knew him said he had never properly recovered from the disappearance of his sister. He carried it with him every day. He was gone before he had the chance to see justice done for her. Charlene's friend Tyne, one of the last people to see her alive, died in November 2022 at the age of 32. An inquest found her death was drug-related. Two young women, connected by a single terrible night in Blackpool, both gone far too soon. The case has never stopped moving, even when it felt like it had. In 2014, a Crime Watch appeal was launched, and a £100,000 reward was offered for information leading to answers. In 2016, a cold case team was brought in, and previously unreleased CCTV footage showing Charlene and Becky walking together on the day she disappeared was released to the public for the first time. In 2023, Leeds Trinity University's Cold Case Unit partnered with Renee Crompton, who runs the Justice for Charlene Downs campaign, to formally review the case and search for new evidence. Renee has spent years walking the streets of Blackpool, retracing Charlene's steps, speaking to people who remember her, refusing to let the town forget. Charlene was failed by everyone who should have kept her safe, Renee has said. The police, social services, they all let her down. We're trying to build a legacy and fight for real justice for her. What Charlene's case revealed, and what it continues to reveal, is not just the story of one girl's disappearance. It is the story of a system that looked at a vulnerable, troubled, 14-year-old child and consistently chose not to act. Social services visited the family home dozens of times over 15 years. 16 men with offenses against minors had access to the Downs household. An internal police report confirmed that at least 11 takeaway shops in Blackpool town centre had been involved in the sexual exploitation of young girls. Charlene was not the only one. Investigators believe there may have been up to 60 victims in the same area during the same period. 4 years after Charlene vanished, 15-year-old Paige Chivers disappeared from Blackpool under strikingly similar circumstances. She too had been a victim of child sexual exploitation in the same part of Lancashire. The man convicted of her murder, Robert Ewing, a self-confessed neo-Nazi with prior convictions for indecency against a child, was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 33 years. Paige got justice. Charlene is still waiting. No one has ever been charged, tried, and convicted for what happened to Charlene Downs. Her body has never been found. The case remains open. Lancashire police have taken more than 2,500 statements and spoken to more than 3,000 people. The investigation is one of the longest running in the county's history. And still nothing. What this case asks of us ultimately is not just grief. It asks for accountability. It asks us to look honestly at the way society treats its most vulnerable children, the ones born into chaos, the ones failed by parents, failed by schools, failed by social services, failed by the police, the ones who fall through every net simultaneously and land somewhere no child should ever land. Charlene Downs was funny. She was cheeky. She loved music and animals and her siblings and the feeling of being free. She had bruises on her body and too much weight on her shoulders, and not nearly enough people willing to stand between her and the darkness that was closing in around her. She was 14 years old. She deserved protection. She deserved stability. She deserved the chance to grow up and find out who she was going to become. Her name was Charlene Downs. She was failed by the world long before the world lost her. And the least we can do, the very least, is refuse to forget her name.